Hey everyone, so I had a recent Reddit post showing my N64 controllers that I modded with Steel 6, 64 bowls, and the custom paracorded cables, and there was a lot of interest in how I did those cables. I did a little write-up, but I thought a video might help show it a little bit better. I don't know if anyone's going to find this useful, but if at least one person does, it's worth it. Just want to start off by saying I have no video making experience, and the only camera I have is my phone, so I apologize for any quality issues with that. These are the 4 controllers that I did from my personal collection. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do that with this orange controller. And we'll start off by taking you to the list of supplies you're going to need. Alright, for materials, obviously we're going to need the original controller, some paracord. This is some paracord that I'm going to be using to show you how to get the core out. It's the only one that I have it in right now. I'll show you to do that easily. The one that I'm actually going to be using for this is this orange one. Already has the core out, so I couldn't use that to show you the whole process. Then your wire choice is going to be very important. From what I could find, the original cord has 26 gauge, so I tried to match that with my 26 gauge wire. I modded mine with 20-foot cord, and I haven't noticed any input latency or anything like that, any dropouts, so it works just fine. But I would go with at least 26 gauge. The controller has, or the cord has 3 wires inside of it. This is a 5-meter one. I want to make it about 15 feet long, and the color is gray. It doesn't matter, it's going to be hidden. It was very difficult to find wire that fits inside of 550 paracord. A lot of it is too thick. The thickness of this original wire is about the same thickness as 550 paracord itself, so this will never fit inside of it. I felt like if I went with a bigger paracord, it would have made the cable way too thick if I wanted to reuse any other wire. So definitely take your time and try to find out what wire will fit inside of the 550 paracord. And next we are going to need a screwdriver to take it apart. I use this iFixit toolkit. I find that the Phillips head 1 works well for all of the screws in the N64 controller. You might want a pry tool to help take the connection off for the joystick, but it's not really necessary. You can just use your finger. You are also going to need heat shrink, a lighter or a heat gun to help melt the heat shrink, the piece of paper towel or a piece of cloth or a rag just to make sure when we use our needle nose pliers that we don't scratch anything up. We need that in order to take the plug apart. When we're taking the plug apart, you also need a credit card or gift card that you don't need anymore because you're gonna have to cut it up into small pieces to shove into the ends of the plug to get it apart. We'll show you that. If you need to measure out how long you're gonna want your cord, you're gonna need a tape measure. A couple of pick tools. I use a 90-degree one and a straight one. A wire stripper. A small flush cutters. Soldering iron. Solder. The size of the solder that I'm using is 0.8 millimeters. And solder. Got this off of Amazon. Alright, so this is the paracord, how you get it from Paracord Planet if you order from there. It's kind of melted together at the end. What you have to do is just cut a little bit off of the tip of it first, flush cutter, scissors, whatever you have. And then you have access to this core on the inside. You just have to peel it back a little bit, and I think there's 7 strands inside of 550 paracord. You can, if you're not doing a very long run, you can just pull this off. You kind of have to bunch it up and keep pulling it until it'll come all the way off. If you're doing a longer bit, the easiest way that I found is to get it started like this, and then wrap it around the leg of a table, something sturdy, and just tie the end off like that, and then you can just pull and pull and pull, and it'll come off a lot easier and a lot quicker. So next thing you want to do is unthread your paracord, and then you will end up with just the outside of it. And next we will your ends may be a little bit frayed, so take your lighter and then just torch the end of them, and that'll melt it. Make sure they're not going to come apart any further during our next step. The next thing you're going to do is thread the cord into the paracord. Something I didn't mention earlier is if you wanted, you could on your cord cut the sheathing and then just take the 3 wires from the inside and thread just those through the paracord. The reason I didn't do that is I just wanted the cord to just have that nice thick feel to it and not be able to roll it between your fingers and feel the different chords. I'm very happy with how this turned out, so I would definitely recommend doing it this way if you can. The way that you put the cord in, the first foot or so is pretty easy. Just thread it on and continuously bunch it up, and then once you get a little bit further down, what you're going to have to do is continue doing the same thing, but then you're going to have to pull it down the entire length of the cord. This is a pretty lengthy process, but keep going until your entire cord is covered in the paracord. When you originally cut your wire, I like to cut it about a few inches longer, 4 to 6 inches longer than what you're going to want your final length to be. There's going to be a little bit tied up in the end of the plug, and then there's also going to be some that is threaded through the inside of the controller, so leave yourself a little bit extra on that. After you have it all threaded, stop about 2 to 3 inches before the end of it, and then hold it very tight and run a few times down the entire length of the cord just to make sure any of the paracord that was bunched up or any slack is out of it. And then at the end of it, this is the rest of the empty paracord, this is the end of the wire. Just take it right at the end and snip it off, and then use your lighter to sear the end of it so it won't fray, and then bring it back over. You want a little bit at the end of each side, so after you do that, pull it back so you have about 1 inch on this side, 1.5 inches, and then pull it the entire length the other way, and then you'll leave it with 1 inch, 1.5 inches on this side as well. Next thing we're going to do is prepare this end to go into the controller side. What we're going to do is slide a piece of heat shrink over the wire and the paracord, and then strip back 1 inch or so of the wire on this side. If you buy the same size or the same wire that I did and it's shielded, we want to remove the shielding from the end of it. All you have to do is twist that around down to the end. I like to twist it up so the strands don't go everywhere when you cut it. and then just cut that at the base. And then each one of these you want to strip back as well. And then we will move on to the controller. And here's the controller. I'm sure most of you know how to take a controller apart already, but if you don't, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 screws. Those are all the same. And then there's 2 smaller screws that are back here and here. So we're going to take all those out. I have them loosened already just so I can get them out quickly. I recommend having a screwdriver with a magnetic tip so it pulls them out. It's not too important for taking it apart because you can just tip it over and dump them out. For putting it back together, it does help a lot, especially for those really deep ones. So we're gonna take it all the way apart. I've already had this one apart. I already cut the wire. I'll show you how it looks when you first take it apart. I have the wire threaded back through so you can see where it originally sat. So this back shell just pulls away. This is how the cord is originally threaded through. You want to thread the one through that we put on afterwards. I like to cut it. This cord is originally sitting in between those 2 pegs attached to that. I like to cut it about right there. And then after we attach our cord onto these wires, it'll sit right back in that area. Shoulder buttons fall out easily a lot. Don't worry about that. And then what we want to do is remove the entire motherboard from the controller assembly. First thing you don't want to forget to do is take the connection for the joystick out. I just like to use my nail for that. You can use some type of pry tool if you want, but it comes out pretty easily. The Z button, just push it to the side a little bit. This one moves a little bit more. It's a little bit longer of a tab, so if you push towards that, it comes out a lot easier. And then you don't actually have to take the joystick out in order to do this if you want to. It is that screw, and that screw. The black one is to actually open the housing. And then again, this is already going to be attached, but I have cut it, so I'm going to take that off to the side. And then the motherboard, or the board, comes out like that, and you can set the rest of the controller to the side as well. And what we're going to be doing to attach the new wire to the board is just stripping back these wires just like we did with the wires on the new wire we're replacing it with. I tried to take these pins out and solder the new wire into those pins so I could reinsert them, and there's just not enough room for me to do it well with my level of expertise. I don't do anything like this for a living. Everything I know I have learned online. I'm a pharmacist, and in no way am an expert on this. So what you also probably could do is desolder those joints on the other side, take this entire thing off and solder the new wire directly into the holes on the motherboard. Again, I didn't know how to do that when I was first doing this, so I didn't, and I'm going to show you the way that I did it. It's the way that I'm doing it, not the best way to do it, so you can choose what you want to do. So get those just stripped back, and then we'll be back with you. Next thing we're going to do is attach the wires to the wires on the board. First thing you want to do is give the wires a nice little twist. I'm only going to show you how to do one of these it's the same for all three, so we'll do one and then come back when all three are done. Again, don't forget to have your piece of heat shrink on there already. And then we want to do a piece of heat shrink for each wire too, just so our connections do not touch each other. So we're going to slide that on. If you cut this back a little further, it'll be a bit easier for you. I didn't do that, whoops. And then you're going to take your wires, cross them, and then loop them around each other. And then once you have that done, I like to put a little bit of flux on it. Just helps the wire take the solder a little bit better. Then take your preheated soldering iron. This is in no way a soldering tutorial. There are plenty of those online. And then you want to solder the two wires together. Makes a nice strong connection there. Your heat shrink may melt a little bit if you have it too close like I do, so try not to do that. I think I'm still going to be able to slip it over, so it's not going to be a problem here. And then take your lighter again. And that is one done, and I'll be back with you after I get the other two done. Alright, so time to reassemble after we got all of that done. We are going to take the heat shrink that we already had on there from earlier and slide it over everything. I went ahead and took my paracord and slipped it up a little bit higher, so hopefully I can cover the end of the cable here and these solder joints that I just made with that piece of paracord. And then going to heat up the heat shrink. And that connection is done. Then we're going to throw it back into the controller. If you ended up leaving your joystick in, you have to come in at a little bit of an angle. That'll help you line it up. There's some holes in the motherboard that have to line up with pegs on the controller. And slide it right in. Going to reconnect the joystick. There it goes. Make sure it's nice and snug. Throw the Z button pad back on. Put it under one side, push it to the side, and then press down. Make sure the pad is all the way down. Gonna throw the silicone back onto the shoulder buttons and then slide them into the slots for them. All right, and then we want to reroute the cord just how it was when we opened it up. So this part should still be thin enough to fit between those two pegs. And then the route that it goes under the tall one, over the short one, and it's a very hard bend to get through the top of the controller. And then you just want to make sure that everything is pushed down well so it doesn't get pinched when you put the top shell or the bottom shell back on. And you just want it sitting in there like that. With how we did this, I noticed that sometimes when you go to set the other half back on, one of these standoffs can catch those wires, so just make sure those are out of the way when you throw it back on. And then the shoulder buttons can be a little bit tough to have not fall out when you're trying to put it back together. You're going to put that little peg in each one into the hole on the shell. Try to hold it this way. If you tilt it too far forward, that's when they start to fall. And then you'll notice two holes on the back shell. That is where these pegs go into. So once everything is back together, it's easiest to line up that tall peg with the hole on the back shell. And then try to tilt the whole thing down, keeping the shoulder buttons underneath the shell, and then press it all into place. You can kind of see here where if those wires were a little bit longer, didn't make that bend as well where they could get pinched under there. So that's the spot that you want to watch just to make sure you don't pinch your wires. And then everything just needs to find a place. And then once you have everything back to where it needs to be, you're going to put your 9 screws back in all the way around. And again, definitely recommend having a screwdriver with a magnetic tip. It makes installing these deep ones so much easier. So line those up, screw them down, and once everything is tight, should have nice end to the cord there, and then we can go ahead and go over to the plug end. Okay, so this is our plug on the original cord, so we need to remove that. The way that you do that, it's held in by 3 clips, there, there, and there. This is what we use a cut up credit card for, or gift card. This top one by the flat end is a little bit thinner than the other ones, so you're gonna have to cut a thinner strip for that. If you cut it too thin, it makes it bend very easily when you try pushing it in. So you're gonna put all 3 of those in, get all 3 started right away. And then you're going to go around with your needle nose pliers. Try to grip it very close to the end, or again, it'll bend very easily. And then get it pushed down. You'll kind of feel a satisfying little click when it gets there. There's 2, and then we're gonna do the 3rd one. And there's the 3rd. And then earlier I had that you would need a piece of paper towels, some type of thin fabric to not damage this plug when we pull it off. Again, I'm going to use my needle nose pliers and grip that. I don't want to scratch it all up. So just going to put it around my needle nose pliers like that, fold the ends over, and then grab the end, get a really nice grip, and then yank. these things are going to go flying, so try doing it over a table. And comes off that easily. Then what you can do is take this off of the end of the cord, set that to the side. There is a knot in here we have to undo. Guess we don't really have to, but it's a lot easier if we do. There is this little circle. I think that just helps to keep stress off of those wires. So we're going to take that off as well. And then we have the wires here. Now those are inserted into pins. This area here is on this hinge, and that will flip up. The way that I do that is I take the 90-degree pick that I have, go underneath and just pry it up. Comes up very easily. And then we are going to use the 90-degree pick again to take each of these 3 wires out. I like to go right at the base, right in front of the crimp end of that, push down and just pry it against the casing, and they pop right out. Just keep an eye on when we go to put these back in that the prongs here were on the left and the right, because we're going to want to put them back in that same way. And then we need to remove these. I could not find any sort of replacement online to solder a new wire into, so unfortunately we do have to reuse these. I found a pretty good method that works for me, and I'll show you how to do that. The first step of it is to cut off the wire from the base with our flush cutters. Keep all of the metal from the pin. And we're just gonna cut it right there. That's 1. 2. And 3. And I'm going to zoom in again, and I will show you how I prepare these for the new wire to go into. With the new wire, again, strip it back the same way we did the other side, and get some wire exposed on the 3 internal wires, just the same way we did with the other one. And then I will show you how to prepare these and then attach the new wire to the old pins. And before I forget, we are going to put a couple of things onto the other end of the wire, the plug end. The plug we are going to put on. You might have to pinch the edge of the paracord in order to get it through. Then it goes on pretty easily. Thread that on. You want to put on the plastic ring again, and then a piece of heat shrink. Maybe next time I'll go with one that's a little bit bigger so it's a little easier to get on. Alright, I'm going to attempt to show you how I put the pins onto the end of the wire. So for the pin, there are these 2 prongs here and here. that hold that wire down, and I find that keeping one of them is enough just to hold the wire in place. We're going to solder it onto the pin, so it doesn't have to be permanent, just temporary to help us hold it while we're working with it. So what I am going to do is take my flush cutters and just cut this one off. So just come in from the side, just dig into the wire a little bit too, makes it a little bit easier to make sure you get the connector off. And then after you have that done, I like to take my pick again and dig as much out of there as I can. It's also held in by a crimp down here. That's fine, that can stay. But we're gonna dig the pick into the end and pull all of that up. Like that. And then that other crimp, we're just gonna make sure that is out of the way because we're gonna push our new wire into there. And then this excess wire, I'm gonna take my flush cutters and get rid of. Like that. And that is ready for our new wire. With the new wire, again, it's trimmed back. I'm going to fold back a little bit because I did a little bit too much when I took the outside off. And then there is that little gap in between on this pin. I'm going to put the wire into that. Alright, so we got that wire inside of that gap. We're gonna push that under the pin that we're using and come in with our needle nose and give it a little squeeze, and that just helps hold this in place while we're soldering it. And then I'm gonna throw a little bit of flux on to help with our solder. And then come in and solder that on. Just like that. You may notice a little bit of flux bubbling in there, not a big deal. And then make sure you don't put too much solder in that it goes up past this point. Those grab onto a pin on the inside and allow it to make the connection. So if you get solder in there, it could affect that. You just need a little bit enough to make a solid connection. And then you can take a piece of heat shrink, pull it over the edge, and I like to stop it just before this bump out, so put the edge right up to that. And then take the lighter again, and we are done with those. Next step is to push it back into the connector. Our next step is going to be putting the pins back into the plug. The order of them was red, white, black, so we're gonna put it back in red, white, yellow because that's the color of our black now. Remember that the two arms here have to be left and right, not up and down. And then when it came out, there was this gap here that was on top. I don't think it should matter which way that goes in, but it came out on top, so I'm gonna put it back in on top. So way on the left for us is our red wire. Gonna get that as far as it'll go until it gives you a little bit of resistance, and then we're gonna use our pick and Get it right at the base of the metal. Again, making sure it doesn't twist at all as you're putting it back in. And push it. And that one is all the way in, and then we'll go back and do the other two. And then for closing this back up, we did make these a little bit thicker by putting that heat shrink and solder on there. So these would surround the old wire. They have a tough time doing that, so I just come in with my flush cutters and trim those down just a little bit. Otherwise this cap has a very tough time closing. So I do that to all of them. And then this should be able to snap back down into place. Like that. And then we are going to take our heat shrink, bring it on, and I just like to put it over everything like that just to give it a nice finish. And then we bring that ring up, tie our knot just like it came out. It'll be a little tougher to fit back in since our cord's a little stiffer than it was before, but tie the knot, try to keep it close to the end over here. If you pull it from this side, it's not too bad to do. And then once you've got your knot, again, just pull it tight. Otherwise, fitting it back into the colored connector can be a little bit challenging. On the connector, you'll see that this part is lowered a little bit. That will go over the lowered part here, and this loop that you make, try to keep that down, otherwise you're going to have a tougher time getting that connector back on. Then you take it, slide it over, gonna want to lead it in like that, and then pull this as you are putting it on. And then I like to put it face down and just give it a nice push. You see it didn't go quite all the way yet. I'm gonna take it off camera and do that again so I can get a little bit more leverage. And it'll snap back into place, and then that end is also done. And just like that, our controller is done. There is our paracorded cable. You can see we're on the controller test ROM, and everything is working just fine. No extra latency or anything like that. So if you guys have any questions that are left unanswered after this video, feel free to put them down in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them for you. Again, I am self-taught on all of this, so there are probably ways to improve it. The ways that I can think of would be easier threading of the paracord onto the cable. If someone knows an easier way to do that, let me know. and also attaching the wire, if you could do that directly onto the board, I think that would be better. I didn't want to mess with soldering directly on the board, which is why I cut the wires and then soldered those together. Doesn't make a difference at all for connection. I think it might just be a little bit cleaner if you were able to do it right onto the board. So yeah, any questions, post them down in the comments and I'll try to get back to you when I can. Thanks for watching.